All right, Maria. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming back. I wanted to check in about how your week's been going so far.
You know, after our last talk, kind of thinking about all the things I'm carrying around, all these extra responsibilities, I think putting focus on it, I'm a little bit more stressed out about it.
Yeah.
Um, but not horribly more stressed out. I feel like it's just a little bit more in depth looking at and thinking about things has added a little bit more weight, but
Right.
not horribly.
Well, one of the things that we talked about last week was some feelings of guilt that you had, and specifically feelings of guilt related to your family and your father and his declining health and not being able to spend as much time with him as you'd like. And that's kind of what I wanted to focus on today, is going over those feelings of guilt and trying to work through those. Have those feelings changed at all this week? Have they gotten any better? Have they gotten worse?
Those haven't gotten any better or worse. I still feel like it's the same amount of am I juggling the appropriate things and giving enough time for my father? But I don't think it's worse. I think I'm just still in the headspace of am I balancing this correctly?
Here you go. Well, when working with guilt, there's a couple different ways to approach it. There's a lot of steps to addressing guilt. One that I think is going to be really helpful for you in this situation is working on identifying how much responsibility you hold towards the circumstances that are causing you to feel that way.
Exactly.
So if you were to kind of put it in your own words, how would you explain why you were feeling guilty?
I am feeling guilty because I've decided to take on things like helping with my sister, all the things that I know that is going to help my parents and my father, taking care of my sister. You know, I'm working as much as I can to help support myself and have extra money and be able to contribute. You know, I'm helping clean around the house. I'm doing all these things that I know are like helping my father out in the end. But I'm losing out on memories and things that I could be creating with them, and I think I'm running out of time. And it's kind of, am I doing this right? I know I'm helping him in one way, but am I destroying our relationship at the end on the other side of it?
Right, that's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that are contributing to that, and you identified some of them. So for this for this exercise, to start, it is simply identifying the situation that's making you feel guilty. And I've given you this sheet here, and if you were to kind of summarize it into a sentence, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but there's some guilt around not being able to spend quality time with your father.
Correct.
When you know that there is, kind of limited time left. So if you can, do you want to write that in the first section there? Excellent. Yeah, and so, we often experience feelings of guilt when we feel like we haven't been living up to our own personal values. And I can tell based on how you've talked about them to me, the work that you're putting in. I mean, again, you said you're working extra hours, you're going to school. You're doing a lot of the stuff for your family. So family is clearly important to you. And when you're kind of being pulled between these things that are taking you away from your family, feeling guilty for that makes sense. But I think it's important to kind of assess how much responsibility you personally hold for that. So I think what we should do now, the next step of this, is simply listing out all the different factors that contribute towards that situation, those feelings of guilt. And so I know you've identified working a lot of hours, going to school. Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, part of with working is just, even when I get home from work, I'm so exhausted.
Right.
That the time I do want to spend with my father, I just don't have the energy to do it, and I don't feel like I can contribute anything really to the conversation, and it's not going to be healthy for us, so I just avoid and do something else instead. So I feel guilty about that, and then just thinking about all my school requirements, all the things that are building up, and they don't really get that because they haven't gone to school, and being the first generation, it's like balancing of explaining the importance of putting time into schoolwork, and balancing family. So it's just a little bit of a struggle in the wall with that one.
Right.
Having to physically be in class and then go briefly at home to go immediately to work. I get home, I'm trying to take care of my sister. I have that added extra thing in there. It's just the extra responsibilities of cleaning up the house, and then just trying to figure out when do I have time at the end of the day for myself. Like, I also got to think of myself in this.
Right. So if I were to kind of summarize some of those things that you just said, it's work responsibilities. If we're going to kind of break them down into pieces, work responsibilities, and you have your school educational stuff, which I'm sure is, you have to have homework when you get home, you have to leave for class, so you're out of the house. there's also taking care of your sister. There's stuff around the house, just chores, and then also your own personal self-care.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the next step, just real quick, jot those down. We can just do little bullet points. Work, school, chores or household responsibilities, taking care of your sister, and self-care or looking after your own mental health.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so the next step, the reason this is called the responsibility pie, is we are going to fill out this nice little pie chart.
Perfect.
And so you're going to save space for yourself last. So
Okay.
there is a degree of personal responsibility in everything.
Absolutely.
The goal here is to actually look at how much responsibility you should carry for this. If you put yourself down first, we have a tendency to over-exaggerate our personal responsibility, so we're going to save that for last.
Perfect.
Of these things, which one do you think is the biggest factor in this situation?
In this situation, I would say the amount of schoolwork and the focus I need to put on it. I think it'd be the biggest one.
Okay. And
I would say about like,
it's up to you. There's no right or wrong answer here.
I would say about like 30%.
30%? Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about the next one?
Work, I would say that's about 25%,
Okay.
right around there. Yeah.
And even just looking at it, not finished and not fully filled out, I can see that those two things are taking they're significant factors
Yeah.
in why you're unable to, again, kind of live up to those values that you're holding for yourself and spending time with family.
Yeah.
Where would you put taking care of your sister, your household responsibilities?
That one I would say is a little bit less. I would say probably like 15. About 15%. I would say is helping with the sister. Okay. Household responsibilities, like in 25%.
Okay. And then have we kind of listed all the things that we identified as some contributing factors to this?
I think so.
Right, so
Yeah.
And then we'd fill in that last space for you. So that would be your own. Looking at that filled in, how do you feel about that? Did you feel that way before, that level of responsibility was yours? Or was it more or less?
No, I feel like that's an accurate representation of about how guilty I feel about that I've contributed to where I'm at right now.
Seeing that, does it feel like you are, when you actually put it down, are you 100% responsible?
No.
And is there anything that you can need to do to make amends to anybody?
I don't think I need to make amends to anybody. I think maybe to myself for beating myself up and allowing myself to get to this point.
Right.
I think is the most important part of this, because if I can fix that part, then I think the rest will kind of come into play with my father. But yeah, I feel like 25% is accurate.
And I also think it's important to remember, and especially looking at all these things, all the obligations you have, all the things that you're working through, it's important to remember that when we're struggling with our own issues, it can be really difficult to be available for others. And it's important to note that you haven't done anything bad or wrong. You haven't actually actively hurt anybody. And feeling like you have, feeling bad about not spending time with your father can really amplify those feelings of guilt. And then looking at some of these things that you have listed, I think some of these things can be addressed. It's another technique that we have through some behavioral activation plans, where we can identify things that you can do with your father, positive experiences, things that the two of you share together.
Okay.
That can help kind of address that guilt. I don't know how that sounds to you.
I think that's great. I think it'd be exactly what I'm needing.
And then I think another thing to consider is, no small part of your pie chart is taking care of your sister and taking care of household responsibilities. And while doing those things may take you away from being able to spend that quality time with your father, I do think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that those are things that help him.
Oh, absolutely. I know for a fact he's very appreciative of all the little things I do in the background.
Yeah.
Like I know for a fact he does.
Okay. Thank you for working through this with me, Maria.
Mhm.
Hopefully this kind of helps you put your responsibility to these feelings of guilt into some perspective,
Mhm.
Helps you feel a bit better about them. And now we can kind of start working through steps to